What is going on, everybody? It is a special episode of Tandy Time today. We have a very special guest. We have the Collectibles Guru, Eric Whiteback, and I'm sure some of you have questions. I know I have some questions for the Collectibles Guru. And before we get started, I just want to remind you all that we still have our sponsor, and if you want to check them out, bit.ly/Tandy50, $50 free wagering at BetUS. bit.ly/Tandy50. So get that out of the way in the beginning. Why don't we? Nice to see some of you here in the chat. And let's see, what video should we introduce Eric with? I don't really have a good one around collectibles. Let's see. We'll give him. How about this one?
I want that one so bad.
Mike.
I wasn't sure what you were going to show there. I was like, is this going to be an old video of me or something?
Yeah, I probably could have. There's plenty to choose from. But hello, Eric. Thank you for being here. I very much appreciate it. I think that many people have checked out your account. I think that you probably have a lot of followers on Twitter who are very curious about like what's going on in the collectible physical world, because we're all these people who really seem to understand digital, and you seem to be someone who really understands the physical. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions and people that are very curious and want to like pull you over to their side.
Yeah, excited to dig into it. I think there's a ton of parallels to talk about, and yeah, I'm definitely like more well versed in the physical collectibles world, but also at the same time very interested in digital collectibles and starting to dabble a little bit myself too. So excited to get into that.
Yeah, so maybe it'll be interesting just for the people watching to understand a little bit more about you. I see behind you, it looks like you have a bunch of video games.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, I'm sort of on this mission right now to like learn about all the collectible spaces and really try to at least dip my toes everywhere. I would say certainly an area of expertise for me is trading cards. Been involved in that for pretty much my whole life, but a new and exciting category is video games for sure. And that's one where it's like, I mean, if you have the right video game in front of you that you had when you were a kid and you see it in that like perfect condition for the first time, seal's still on, and it's the game that you grew up with playing your entire childhood, like there's something really fun and exciting about that. So yeah, video games is a big category. You can see I've got some like action figures up here, starting to get into comics a little bit as well, starting to trade in some NFTs, So Rare and Panini NFT and things like that. And I will say, I do want to disclose, like before we get too deep into this, I do have a partnership with So Rare, so I just want to put that out there. But yeah, it's I love all these collectibles categories, and I'm just eager and excited to learn more about the ones that I know less about.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to ask though, with the video game one, how do you look at your favorite video game from childhood and not want to open it and play it?
Well, I mean, you can buy a game and play it. Like I have, I'll just grab one right here behind me. This is like my favorite one that I spent probably too much money on. But some of you will recognize this title. This to me is a classic. This is the Super Monkey Ball for GameCube. This is the
Mhm.
highest graded copy in existence, a 9.8A. I think I paid 5,000 for this, and so this was like the 6th or 7th highest GameCube sale of all time when I bought it. I don't know where it sits right now, but also like I'm not going to grab this one, but like sitting over there with my GameCube is an open to copy that I play. So
Okay.
it's you can have both, I would say.
Fair enough. And are you keeping track? Because one thing that's very unique about the digital collectible space is that you can see who's buying and selling in real time. And
Mhm.
and sometimes that's wonderful, and sometimes that isn't such a great thing to see. Um, how does that relate to like picking up, a GameCube game for $5,000? Like, are you ever looking at the price of this again, or
Yeah, I
what's
mean,
your play
it's a
here?
great question. I think, particularly when you are buying collectibles where it's something that's like a pretty new thing, right? Like graded video games have not been around for decades, right? Like, video game collecting has been around for a while, but these sealed graded video games, it's a relatively new phenomenon. And when you talk about games where there aren't really many, if any, sales data to go off of, like I sort of call that no comp land, right? Where it's like, and I think you have to spend a lot of time in a category before you get really comfortable in no comp land when there's like a trading card that you haven't seen come up maybe ever, or a video game where you're like, I've been looking for this game on eBay save searches for 3 years and I've never seen one. Like once you're really deep, then you feel like, okay, I know enough about what other games have sold for, what other cards have sold for, what other comics or action figures have sold for, where I feel comfortable now putting a pretty high bid, or whatever it is, a pretty high dollar amount on an item where I've never seen one sell before, because I know what that money would get me elsewhere if I spent it elsewhere within the same category. So, yeah, it can be really hard. And certainly for these newer categories, there's not a lot of data. But I mean, look, I think everybody who collects physical would know that like eBay completed listings is your best friend.
Mm.
Going and looking at the sold listings and seeing what those have sold for in the past, or similar things have sold for in the past, is always a really helpful tool. But yeah, there's not a perfect science to it. It's part science, part art, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it wrong. So that's what I would say about that. But certainly, I think when you are in no comp land, that's sometimes the place where you can hit the biggest wins, and the biggest returns as well. But for me, though, this game is like, I think someone would have to offer me like 6 figures for me to think about selling this game. Like this one to me is like so cool and such an iconic piece of my childhood that I don't know if I would ever really want to sell it unless the money was just stupid to walk away from.
Yeah. But is that something where are you continuing to look at eBay and just like seeing if there's other sales happening? Or do you just kind of turn your brain off and come back in like 5 or 10 years, or only if you get a ping that's like, I'll give you 6 figures, or how's that work?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, most of the things that I have in my collection, particularly the things behind me, like I don't actively have them for sale. I'm not too worried about selling them at the moment. They're things that I generally believe in longer term, if they're things that are in my collection, or things where I just don't care about the price because I just want them for myself and that's whatever. But yeah, I mean, I'm always monitoring the big auction houses. I'm always monitoring Golden. I'm always monitoring PWCC, Heritage, even sometimes Sotheby's and Leland's and places like that. I'm always checking eBay. I have multiple eBay accounts because eBay limits you to 200 saved searches. And there's more than 200 things that I'm like actively looking for and trying to see if new copies come up, or if there's a really interesting sale of a certain price point, and use tools like Card Ladder and stuff like that as well to go back in time and see even sales data from 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's definitely part art, part science. It's not 100% one way or the other, but I'm always just sort of monitoring and seeing what's going on.
It sounds like a lot to keep up with. What about like any big wins or big losses or just like big lessons learned from like the last several years of doing this?
Yeah, I'll give you a big win and a big loss to start. Big win is I had a Christian Pulisic card that I bought for 6,000. It was his rookie patch autograph, number 2 5. Had a really sweet. You could see like the little crest, the U.S. crest in the patch window. I picked that up for a little over 6,000 and sold it, I think, a month or two later for like 45,000.
Wow.
So that was a big win. A big loss, on the other hand, was I bought a Cristiano Ronaldo PSA 10 Manchester United 2003 rookie card. There was a time when these were like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 5, 10, 30. They got up to 30,000. And then I caught one on the dip at 12. And I was like, this is great. Ronaldo hasn't really panned out the way that people had hoped. Plus, base cards in general are down. I think I sold that for like 2,800 bucks. And then the sale after mine was like 1,600. So I'm like, okay, at least I feel good about, selling it. But my general rule, and this is something that I've definitely learned along the way, because it's very easy to get pot committed on something, right? Like, I spent so much on this. Like, I can't sell it for a loss. I can't sell it for a loss. I can't sell it for a loss. My general rule is, if I wouldn't buy the item at its current price, at its current market price, then I should sell it, because there are tons of items that I would buy at their current market price. So even if I paid $12,000 for something, if I wouldn't go and buy that for $3,000 again, then I should sell it right now. Or if I have something that I paid $3,000 for that's now worth $30,000 and I wouldn't buy it for $30,000, then I should sell it for $30,000 right now. So my general rule is, if I would not buy it at the current market price, then I'm just going to sell that thing and not think twice about it.
But that's impressive to be able to have that kind of like mental, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, like stability, because because what I've seen on the physical market, at least, which has also kind of mirrored the digital market, is the physical market saw a huge spike. Like I remember when there were stories about, VC capital type investors pooling together, buying all the best rookies, and you saw people like Vegas Dave. I think you actually showed a picture of him the other day with his Derek Carr, the nice like Schadenfreude, is that how you pronounce the word? But he spent like $500,000 on Derek Carr rookies. But yeah, that whole industry, the physical industry, was going absolutely bonkers, and then that took a hard, like, came back down to earth in a hard way. So it's interesting to be able to look at cards that you own during that period when everyone's like the sky is falling, and still be able to say, no, I wouldn't sell this. How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's interesting when people like, if people were very bullish on the card industry 12, 18, 24 months ago at those prices, then they should be like even more bullish on it now, is sort of how I view it, right? Like if you were liking certain cards at 2,000 and now they're $600, like you should be pretty excited about the opportunity to buy those cards. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I certainly play a longer game with a lot of my stuff, so I think that makes it a little bit easier. I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I don't necessarily need to liquidate certain things and when prices come down. But I've also heard it said, I think it was Chamath Palihapitiya who said this, who maybe stole it from someone else, I don't know, but fortunes are made in down markets and collected in up markets. And I think that's really what we're going to see here in collectibles in general. Like when collectibles are down, that's when you should be going in and buying the things that are going to be long-term important collectibles, both digital and physical, that are going to really, be huge beneficiaries of the next time there is a big spike, right? Like now's the time to be putting your chips down and placing your bets. And then when that next big upswing comes, like you'll be in a really great position to collect on that. So fortunes are made in down markets and collected in up markets. I'm trying to make my fortune right now and collect it whenever there's another really big upswing.
Okay, not financial advice, everybody. Cool. And so you said you're also dabbling in NFTs, and of course, most of my audience is interested in that stuff. So what NFTs? You said Panini and So Rare. Have you been looking at anything else? Have you been looking at like general PFP NFTs that used to be worth a lot of money and are now worth less? Have you been looking at NBA Top Shot?
I will sort of preface this by saying, like, I'm very underinformed on a lot of this industry, and there's a lot of projects that I don't even know about or have done literally zero research on, and even the ones that I like are ones that I'm like, I've looked at these for a few hours and they make sense to me, right? So keep that sort of grain of salt in mind as I sort of talk about some of the things I've been interested in. But certainly, I think I lovingly refer to them as gateway projects, right? Which would be like the Panini NFT or the So Rare NFTs, right? Because what happens with those is, like, I have collected cards my whole life. If I go and look at some random MFers or like CryptoPunks or whatever, just like if I go and open OpenSea and I'm just like, whoa, this is overwhelming, right? And like, I don't even know where to begin on a lot of that stuff. But when I go and if I play around on Panini NFT, or if I particularly So Rare, like if I go on there, like I'm like, oh, there's 4 parallels. This is how many there are of each of them. They're used to play a game. Like I get it. Like very quickly I get it. And so I think those projects that are much more approachable to me work as a really great gateway. So that's sort of where I view myself right now in the NFT space. I'm like playing the gateway games, and by the way, like I think those projects could be really, really important long term. And I think that, I'm a big believer that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And so I love when there's these really simple, easy to understand, intuitive products that people can come in, are very approachable. And those things to me are like the ultimate sophistication. So that's what I would say about those. Now, I will also say, by virtue of getting into So Rare and some of these other, gateway projects, I might call them, I am becoming more and more interested in some of these other things that I know less about. But like, from an outsider's perspective to me, I'm like, I think CryptoPunks make a ton of sense. Like if it's hard for me to view a world where NFTs are very, very important, where CryptoPunks aren't. Hard for me to understand like how that would possibly happen. I also, for some reason, just like I like chromie squiggles. Like this is going to be like a weird thing to say. They reminded me of Rothkos. I just love the sort of the consistency among the design and how there's just like all these, a little bit of a different color, a little bit of a different design or pattern, but it's, always thematically very similar. Right. And I think, Rothko is very much the same way, where you can see a Rothko and be like, that's a Rothko. You can do the same thing with a squiggle. And I think that's cool. And also, firsts in the collectibles world are important, and squiggles are a first, and just as CryptoPunks are. So the firsts always are something that I'm keeping an eye out for. Yeah, I mean, I've dabbled in Top Shot. I think Top Shot is interesting. There are things about it I like. There are things about it I don't like. But from an outsider's perspective, definitely like punks and squiggles are two that I'm looking at. Of like, look, if there's going to be a more like typical NFT project that I would get into, those two strike me as ones that I'd be really interested in owning.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's hard to disagree with that, especially CryptoPunks. That seems to be the grail. Like the ultimate grail for most people. Maybe Bored Apes. I think Bored Apes might actually be worth more now. I'm not even sure. I haven't looked in a while. But that's actually a good question. If we're going to talk about NFTs, general NFTs for a second, what do you think about Bored Apes? Because Bored Apes are not the original, and yet they may be worth more currently, or at least they're doing more in the space. Is a project like that interesting to you, or as a physical collector, you're way more interested in like the first of something, the provenance, the story, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a bias that I bring coming from physical collectibles into digital, right? And I think anyone who was a collector more than like 5 or 10 years ago is someone who is coming from physical to digital, right? So if you were a collector of anything 10 years ago, it had to be physical. There weren't really digital things to collect 10 years ago, hardly. But yeah, I definitely bring that in where I have some of these biases of like, like I love the first. I love the first. The first is important. Or even like, I come from buying gold Prism actual physical cards to then going to Panini NFT. I'm like, I want to buy the gold digital cards too, right? So I bring that bias of like, these are the things that I liked with physical, and bring that over to digital. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's as far as Bored Apes go, and this is just purely opinion, personal preference. I've never liked the art at all, and always found it to be pretty tacky. And so like from that perspective, I'm just like, hey, look, I get that this is cool for someone else. And I just in the same way that you see behind me, all these titles here are like GameCube. It's the system I played. It's like no hate to N64 or SNES or NES. That stuff does nothing for me. I didn't play those systems. They were before my time. And so I'm like, I get it. They're cool. They're amazing. I love like the history of it, but like they don't really speak to me. And I understand that there's a collector out there that's the grail for, and more power to him. And in the same way, that's sort of how I feel about Bored Apes, right? It's like, might my tastes and opinions change over time? Certainly possible. But from where I sit right now, I'm not personally a big fan of the artwork. And so that makes it less interesting to me.
Agreed. When I first saw them, I also thought this artwork is so ugly. There's no way anything could possibly happen here. Then, we all know what happened after that.
Yeah.
So the audience is definitely very eager to learn more. You mentioned that there's some things you liked and some things you didn't like about NBA Top Shot. So my audience is very NBA Top Shot centric. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. I'm sure they're also very curious to hear a little bit more about the things you liked and didn't like.
Okay, so which one do you want me to start with?
Why don't we start? I don't know. When you have to break news to someone, do you usually do the bad thing first or the good one first? Maybe start good so you can win them over.
Okay. One of the things that I like is there are way less like SKUs than what most people think. Like I think, last I checked, there were 3,540 different Top Shot moments. That's nothing. That's like virtually zero. Like most physical trading card sets that get made have way more cards than that in a single set. And you're talking about, like, I don't know, Zion had 5,000 different, this is not the exact number, I'm just guessing ballpark, 5,000 different cards made in the last 2 years, right? And it's like, how many Top Shot moments does he have? 5, 6? I don't even really know. But when you think about it from that perspective, certainly there is less Top Shot moments than physical cards. And there's always this like sort of weird, push-pull comparison between the physical and digital. And people are like, I like the physical cards. It's like, well, I like the digital moments. It's like, well, one of the things that bothers me so much, and one of the things that I'm so frustrated by right now in the collectibles community broadly, is like this infighting between physical and digital. Like these things can coexist, and everyone's part of the same team the way that I see it.
Yeah.
It's like, I started in physical collectibles. I'm really interested in digital collectibles. And I've met people and talked to plenty of people who, our NFT people first and digital collectors first, and we get to become friends and we start talking about cards, and they're interested in cards, right? And I don't know if I've ever really seen someone who was like, I collected physical and now I put all that money aside and now I only collect digital, or vice versa. I've never seen it really go either way. And so like this sort of narrative that like, digital's stealing people from physical, I need to hate on the digital as a physical collector to like protect my bags, or vice versa, to me is like just complete self-sabotaging behavior. Because when you have a physical collector who is hating on a digital collector, do you think that digital collector is likely to start buying physical trading cards or video games? No, they're likely to dig their heels in more. Same thing in the opposite direction, right? So like by virtue of people trying to what seems to me is what's going on is people are trying to like protect their bags and hate on something publicly so that people don't buy it and put the money with them, right? Like, but ironically, what's really happening is when you hate on something that someone else collects and loves, like, which you should just be happy that people are collecting things that they enjoy, and no matter sort of what that is, right? As long as they're not hurting anyone else, you should appreciate other people's enthusiasm for what they collect. Like if people in physical cards just went to digital collectors, like, hey, I don't really understand this, but like, tell me more about it. Or like, hey, you know what? This isn't for me, but this is cool. I get it. Like that would bring way more people into physical collectibles than like hating on digital collectors, and vice versa, right? Like I've seen it the other way around too, where digital collectors like, that's just ink on cardboard. You guys are stupid, right? Like these are all self-sabotaging acts. Like people need to remember we're all on the same team. This pie is not finite that we're talking about here. This is a pie that can expand. When physical wins, digital wins. When digital wins, physical wins. And I think in the future, these physical and digital will probably be more tied than they are today, and more tied than any of us can really even comprehend right now. So that's like, in terms of the physical digital debate, like I don't even like to frame it that way. I think it's all part of the same team, right? It's like that'd be like people talking about like a Tops and Panini debate within sports cards. It's like, no, you're all card collectors. This is great. It's like, well, we're all collectors in general. This is great. Like, let's be a part of the same team and be excited for each other and grow this thing together and be a friendly, welcoming community instead of this weird infighting that makes outsiders be like, I want no part of that.
Yeah, I think we're all very tribal. I think you see it in like the NFT collections as well. And I think it's like what you're saying. It's like, no, my tribe is the best tribe. Your tribe can't come close to my tribe. But I think you're right. I think you attract bees. What's the saying? You attract bees with honey or something like that. I don't know anymore. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. And now I feel like I'm all over the map here. Your question was like, what do you like about Top Shot? And now I'm like,
well, yeah, okay. But you like that there's not a lot of SKUs. Are you aware of how much supply is behind each SKU? And also
that is less. Yeah, that makes me a little bit more worried, right? And so when I see these moments that have 60, 70,000 units or whatever you want to call them, copies made, to me, those are like, people need to view those really, really high print run, and I don't know, mint run, whatever the terminology is. I'm still learning here, right? Like those really high print run moments, like those should be viewed as like fun things for people to just sort of own and trade around, and not be viewed as some place to really store capital in a meaningful way, would be my sort of take on it. And it's the same way in sports cards, right? Like I will go and open, 20 boxes of cards and get 3,000 cards and keep 2, because I'm like, the other 2,998 are just fun collectibles that aren't really great places to store capital. And that's how I would view like Top Shot in general too, probably, is, for people that play the game and collect purely for the fun part of it, like that is amazing. More power to you. That makes me really excited. For the people that are trying to store capital, I would say like you're probably going to be looking at it similar to how you would look at sports cards, where just most of the supply out there is not truly investment grade. It's in cards, I would say like less than 1 in 1,000 cards are investment grade. I might even go as far to say less than 1 in 100,000 or 1 in a million cards are investment grade. But I think I can certainly understand the thesis around why some of these Top Shot moments could be valuable long term. Now, if you want to get into like a couple of things that I dislike about it, well,
that's the show, everybody. No.
I'll say I'm not a fan of like the IRL utility thing. Never been a big fan of that. And I think, if I want to go buy tickets to a Warriors game, I'm just going to buy tickets to a Warriors game. I'm not going to like go try to get 300 Top Shot moments to be on top of the leaderboard to win the challenge to get tickets to the game, right? Like I would just go buy tickets to a game. And I think for like the real whales involved in this, and that's where so much of like the top end of the market is built, to the real whales involved, I feel like the IRL stuff is sort of like, I think they sort of like laugh it off. They're like, oh, what? Like I'm gonna get like, I want to put $1 million into Top Shot. I'm gonna get like, to go to a Warriors game and sit like in the, even if it's a great seat, like for $1 million, you're like, I'm just, this makes it feel small. to
But
people
what
that I
about,
think are
hold
the
on.
really big whales.
What about the unbuyable stuff? That's the only counterpoint I'd give you. What about like eating shrimp scampi out of Clay Thompson's bowl?
Yeah, I mean, that's like cool. I understand why that's cool and people appreciate that, but I still think for like the real whales, that's not going to be the thing that like gets them excited. I think they're after other things besides IRL experiences. And I think the IRL experiences tailor towards, not that it's all about whales, right? Like it's great to tailor towards other people too, but I think whales drive the market. And I think that the IRL piece just makes it feel a little cheaper. It makes it feel like that's like the end goal as opposed to like actually creating this long-term valuable asset that's a great store of capital. That's one thing that I would say. I've definitely been a little bit confused by some of the set lines and some of the naming and some of the things around that too. And I like I said before, I think simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So I think a little more simplicity there probably would have behooved Top Shot. And I will say too, just generally, Roham also built CryptoKitties. And the trajectory of price of CryptoKitties, if you look at that graph, I bet it overlays almost perfectly to what has happened with NBA Top Shot. And there was, it was slow, 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 and then boom, right? And they both of them both had their moment where they just went absolutely berserk and then came back down. But I don't know that maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if CryptoKitties ever recovered and got anywhere near those highs where they were at. Don't know that it ever should have gotten as high as it was, or that it should be higher now, or any of that. But I just think that's like a sort of interesting side note. Is like he also built that, and it feels like it had a very similar sort of graph to it if you think about the pricing, of the CryptoKitties versus Top Shot moments.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow. I think that there's certain things about Top Shot that are different than the CryptoKitties. Definitely like the big IP
I agree with that.
partnership and that.
Yep.
But yeah, I think both have seen a spike and a fall, as we've seen in many other markets as well. And what you say about the simplicity, what was it? Simplicity is the ultimate
Sophistication. Yeah.
sophistication. Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think that that's been part of the challenge of how it's grown and how they've adopted different ways of attracting different like tiers of collector, and it's made it a little bit confusing as to like what you should collect in a way. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably where you're coming from. But yeah,
But look, I also really I understand the thesis around it too, right? Like I get that there's only so many LeBron James NBA Top Shot debuts. And I get that and I think like all of this is contingent on Top Shot being around for the long haul and being an important project long haul. But if they can achieve that, then I believe that there are a lot of great places to store capital within NBA Top Shot moments.
All right, fair. Let me see if there's any other Top Shot related questions, because I'm sure there are. I feel like there's well, here's one. If Top Shot removed IRL utility, would it make it more appealing to you?
I don't know if it would. So I see some other comments in here. Imagine saying it's a waste to actually reward users and make them stick around for more. And then there's some name calling. But like, look, I think
Don't mind Poker Pro Eric.
I think there are other ways to get people to stay than to give them IRL experiences. And I just worry that IRL experiences push away some whales. That's sort of how I would view it, right? And it's like I tend to like things too, and I'm a collector, right? So you got to know that I'm coming in with this bias. I like collectibles that are meant to be collectibles, and when I think you start to like, it feels like there's this balance, right? Of like, can it be purely collectible and purely utility at the same time? It's like I think you have to take away some of the collectability to add utility. And so as a collector, I'm biased towards the collectability over the utility, and that's the thing that I would rather there be an emphasis on. Not that IRL is inherently bad or there's not great ways to do that, but I just think from the collecting perspective, if you're gonna want to try to make those really long-term, super valuable assets, I think that when you add IRL, you have to naturally bring down a little bit of the collectability of that asset.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I think, I mean, in a way, you kind of answered this already, where you said certain things you can see the value long term. I imagine you probably feel the same way about collecting certain rookies, as you might, you said the LeBron James Top Shot debut. Obviously, that's more of like a grail. But who knows? Maybe Paolo Banchero will be a top 10 player one day.
Yeah. And I'll say too, like, and this is another bias I bring in from card collecting. I think I have the name of this right. Cosmic Series 1. Is that the big one?
I think so. It's one of the big ones. Sure.
So like, to me, I'm a big believer in set collecting. because you look at like a 1952 Topps PSA 10 card of not Mickey Mantle, but like the random nobody sells for like $100,000, right? So, there is proof in this concept of like people will go and want to collect the entire set when you have these big whale collectors later on, and they might need, the Michael Carter Williams Cosmic Series 1 or who's some random player who's not that valuable, right? And so it's like you see the 1986 Fleer Johnny Moore PSA 10 go for $80,000, $90,000. And there's like, what, 80 or 90 of those? And this is a basketball player that like no one really cares about in the collecting community, but it's just people want to complete that 1986 Fleer PSA 10 set and they need the Johnny Moore. So they will pay up for a guy that would otherwise be worth almost nothing, right? And so I would say, if you believe in Top Shot long-term and it being an important project long-term, then I would personally, I've heard people say like, don't go and buy the low tier cosmic, S1s or whatever it is. Like if I was putting a lot of money in Top Shot, I think it would be focused on debuts of legitimate of players that are going to stand the test of time and Hall of Fame caliber players. And then it would be like, sort of sweeping the floor on Cosmic S1s, because that's like, if that's the set, maybe I'm wrong about that from a little bit of an outsider's perspective that is the set, but like to me, I would go and just start buying those guys up. It's like the green PMGs in basketball or football. I don't know if you're familiar with this set, the Precious Metal Gems from 1997, but it's a set that they only made 10 of each of these cards of each player, right? And it's like I've always said in cards at least, and I think this will transfer into digital collectibles as well, but in physical cards, it is better to have the right card of the wrong player than the wrong card of the right player. And so an example of that would be, you could go back and buy any card 3 years ago from 1997, a green PMG of any player. Pick the worst player you can think of from the 90s era. That card is probably up 5x plus. You could also go back a couple of years and buy a Tom Brady PSA 10 Prism base card. And that card is maybe down 80, 90% from the top. And so as you get more and more involved in these collectibles categories, I find that it's actually easier to predict what sets are going to be important than it is to predict what players are going to be important. And so I'm a big believer in set collecting. And one of the places that I put a huge percentage of my net worth in is, and I can sort of explain this in a second, but like I'm a big believer in the Panini Prism World Cup sets, because I think those are really important in the soccer collecting community. And I think the soccer card hobby is a lot smaller now than it will be in the future. And so I have went and bought, like, I'm trying to get the complete gold Prism set from every Prism World Cup release. There's 3 releases, 14, 18, and 22. And I'm trying to get the gold Prism of every single player from all those sets. There's only 10 of each of those in existence. But, as a set collector, it's like, now I'm willing to, like, if someone has a random player that I need, I will pay $400 or $500 for that, where that card might have gone for $100 2 years ago. And more people are sort of starting to think about collecting golds of their country and all these things. And so prices are going up. But in that sense, it's like, as a collector who sees that this set is probably going to be important long-term, I don't have to worry about, is Ronaldo going to go and, have this weird thing at the end of his career where he signs for a Saudi Arabian club or whatever. It's like, I bought the right card, so it doesn't matter. Right. Or it's like, is so-and-so going to tear their ACL? Is this guy going to, is his team going to get relegated? Like it doesn't matter so much when you're set collecting. And so that's what I would say. I could be wrong about which set it is. From the outsider's perspective, it feels like Cosmic S1 is the set. But I would not be afraid to go and buy the low tier players from the really important sets.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think also something that appears different to me is that with digital, and especially with like NBA Top Shot, everyone who collects, there's like a group of us on Twitter, right? And we are constantly communicating with each other, and also constantly communicating with like the decision makers at Dapper Labs, which I feel like is very unique. And then every time a release is made, people are criticizing it, critiquing it, people super pros, people super against. We're so unbelievably connected that when a decision is made from the Dapper side, where let's say they make a decision like the one you referred to earlier, we're going to release a bunch of cards at a 60,000 count, right? A lot of people went up in arms in that. They're like, how are you doing this? This is just like you're sucking liquidity out of the marketplace. Another thing, by the way, that's interesting to understand is that this is using, of course, a Dapper wallet. So it's like Chuck E. Cheese money. It's like you go in, you use your Chuck E. Cheese money, you got to like transfer it back to United States dollars to get out, right? So there's some things that are unique there, I feel, which has a big effect on what otherwise should be more predictable, like behavior in a collecting market.
Yeah, and look, I mean, look, to Roham's credit, like the guy's out in the public, right? And I don't think most people could name like the Panini or Top CEO.
Exactly.
These guys have no presence, and even like go and try and look up who's on their board of directors or anything. Like you can't find information on these people. There's like a lot of secrecy, and I will say like too, Topps and Panini, these are the two big sports card manufacturers. For those of you who might not know, the big physical sports card manufacturers. Like every time there's a release, people are saying things, hating on things, and sometimes like I'm in that group too of like this needs to be better. There's like way too many different versions, or you put the wrong autograph on this guy's card. Like those are all interesting things that happen in sports cards too. But Tandy, to your point, it's like there's definitely way more of a two-way communication in the Top Shot world versus the physical world. It's just like one-way communication, and like no one's even sure if people at Panini see or hear these things, or people at Top see or hear these things. It just kind of like usually goes unanswered, and there's not a single person to point to for things. So it is really interesting. I do wonder if Top Shot feels like they're in a position where they're sort of like damned if they do, damned if they don't with certain things. It feels like there might be one group calling for more higher count releases and another group calling for less lower print run releases, and then it's like, well, geez, it's hard to please everyone in those situations, right? So I certainly feel their pain a little bit too, and at least credit to that group for being out in the public and really interacting with their communities. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting, honestly, and sometimes I wonder if that open communication, like you said, can actually hurt them. And it seemed like that they actually have pivoted from that, because they were responding to like everything for a while, and people like me were looking at that and being like, that's enough already. Like, cut it out. You don't need to be in constant communication. And now they've sort of been much more thoughtful, and they don't release information until it's 100% fully baked and that kind of thing. So in that sense, I think it's better. What's also interesting about what you said about like circulation count, that's a big topic of discussion among the Top Shot community. And, one whale, he's like one of the top 10 holders. I remember, so there were those 60K counts, which everyone lost their mind about. And if you're not aware, they basically said that these 60K counts were going to be used as kind of like a currency to purchase things on the website. So they weren't going to be treated as like, a store of value as much as like a trade ticket, honestly. So this whale that I'm aware of, his name's Alexo, and he's saying, no, they can't release lower circulation counts in the future, because that's going to hurt all the previous value. And I remember thinking to myself, no, we should lower it depending on how many active users actually want to buy this stuff. That's what we should do. And I think in hindsight, I might have been wrong, because now, for example, it was a 60K release, and now it's like 15K basically. And so now what that's done is anything that's 15K it like or above is all treated basically as the same. It's all like trade ticket fodder. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
curious.
really interesting to hear you
Yeah.
say that. And like I mean, I'm just writing some notes here as you talk, because like there's a few things that I'm thinking about. One is like that conundrum of, is actually interacting with your community beneficial for your community, is a really interesting one, right? It's like I think Ford was like, if I would have built what people wanted, I would have made faster horses, right?
Right.
And so like when people are asking for faster horses and they don't get faster horses, it's like a weird thing, right? Because it might ultimately be best for Top Shot long term, something that they do, but I would imagine that in the current state of things, even if Top Shot does something that does turn out to be really great for the project long term, there will still be people, with some backlash against that when it comes out. So that's one. Two is, and I have been a huge advocate for this in cards for the longest time, and I think Top Shot is probably experiencing some of the same uh, issue. And it's one of the things I think Sorare has gotten really, really right. But I think there needs to be a much more clear delineation between this high end investment grade product versus things that are just sort of like meant to be fun and enjoyed and, put a few bucks in and it is what it is, right? Like, and an example in trading cards would be like, there's a couple different Topps baseball sets that release every year. There's everything from Topps Paper Base to Topps Chrome to Topps Chrome Sapphire. And I wish that instead of them going and adding more variations to the high-end product, like a Topps Chrome Sapphire, I just want them to be like, look, we're going to print unlimited Topps paper base. And like, we're going to blow that thing up. And that's not really meant to be an investment grade product. That's for kids who like want to go to the store and get a pack for 99 cents. We're going to make that an option. Right. And I wish that's sort of how they did that. And then Topps Chrome Sapphire, they're like, it's the same print run every year. This is how we're going to do it. It's the same parallels. We're not adding new parallels. We're not adding new cards. And if demand drives the price up, then demand drives the price up. But this is the product if you're really a serious high-end collector. And I think they've done that some. I wish they did it a little bit more, but it's one of the things Sorare has gotten right, where they just have these like tiers. There's, unique, super rare, limited, right? And it's like you can very clearly delineate what is what and what should be worth more based on that, and what's the high end stuff and what's sort of the fun, even the free stuff, right? Which I think is a really cool element that Sorare has nailed. In the art world, and I know I'm a collector, so I'm really wrong about a lot of the stuff that I'm saying here, particularly as it relates to digital in a world where I have not spent a ton of time in the NBA Top Shot world. So a lot of the things I'm saying, if you know better, just disregard them. I'm sure there are things like that here. In the physical art world, normally the way that this works is an artist will come out with a print and they'll have an edition size of 50, and they'll come out with the next print and it's an edition size of 50. And if he's selling out, what that artist is not supposed to do is make the print run bigger. That's what they're not supposed to do. They're supposed to make the price higher. So instead of being like, I'm going to sell 1,000 units at $50, well, I'll sell 50 units at $1,000, right? And so then what happens is people who are previous holders of his previous artwork feel really good because, hey, I got in at the edition size of 50 when it was $300. Now he's charging $1,500 for an edition of 50. I feel like I'm winning, right? And so in the art world, typically it is frowned upon when someone really increases their edition size, particularly quickly. And so I do worry about that some in general with a lot of collectibles categories. That's not a worry unique to Top Shot, but I think if you intentionally undersupply to demand, then you actually create more demand by doing so. If you meet demand, then you get in this weird spot where demand might slowly come down. I come from the Supreme and streetwear world, right? So having been there and having seen how so many people got into Supreme, and Supreme might look like this sort of accidental, unintentional, too cool for school brand that just got lucky and sort of caught the butterfly and happened to have this really great run. But it's actually very different. They're a very intentional company that did things, very particularly for quite a while. And one of the things that they do is they intentionally undersupply to demand. So what would happen then is Supreme would release every Thursday in store, and you would go to the store, right? And you'd wait in line for 3 or 4 hours and you'd make $500, right? And that's pretty much how it worked back then. So what would happen is people would be like, wait, I can go wait in line for a couple of hours and make a few $100. I'm going to be there. So they go the first week, they make $300 or $400. They go the second week, same thing. And they go the third week, same thing. And they go the fourth week and they go, I actually kind of like that polo shirt. Right. And that's how it starts for so many people in the Supreme world. And I think when you intentionally undersupply to demand and there's an opportunity for people to come in and flip and make a quick buck, even if it's just on certain products, then I think that the demographic of people interested in Top Shot is this small compared to the demographic of people interested in making money, which stretches to both ends of the earth. And if they can use that huge demo of people interested in making money to get this demo a little bit bigger, then I think that's a huge win. I think that's how Supreme did it. I think that's how a lot of companies have done it in the past. And it's not to say that you can't have these open edition releases. Even think about Cause, who's a pretty prominent artist today who started with these smaller edition sizes and now will do something called an open edition where he basically, whatever it is, 24 hours, order as many as you want, and we're going to cap it after 24 hours. But he's very clearly delineating this is an open edition. This is not really investment grade. Maybe it goes up a couple $100 or maybe it goes down a couple $100, but this is open edition. And I wonder if there's, a little bit more clear distinction between how the releases work and the open edition and things like that, if that could be something really beneficial for Top Shot as well. I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but certainly I wish more collectible companies, more collectible categories were more intentional about how they thought about this.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Top Shot was kind of waiting in that Supreme line when it was back in its heyday, where it was, just wait in line. If you can get a pack, it's instantly a few $100. And it did attract so many people. But then what ended up happening is what you referred to, which was they said, okay, well, and they had, they have venture capital investors, and they're like, well, here's how we're trending. So now we're going to release a ton more. And now all these people are going to just keep coming back for more because they just love our product. and that is not what happened. But I'm curious then with like Supreme, actually, if there's any correlations there. And I did actually want to ask you a little bit about that. I know it's not your focus anymore 100%, but I know you used to be very focused in on it from like the content, social media, etc. side. You were like one of the main Supreme hype beasts. I went down the rabbit hole last night. I saw you were like shattering a Supreme Cupid on the ground, then like selling pieces of it online. And I mean, you were doing some interesting things, pouring coffee on yourself. I mean, I saw everything. Um, I'm curious though, because you're not into it anymore, and obviously it took a turn. What lessons did you learn from the way that Supreme conducted their business? You can educate those of us that are uninformed, like I am, because I know of Supreme the same way that most people know of it. It's that red logo with the white text, and it's over everything. And people overpay for silly items like staplers. But like, tell us more, because
I
I'm
thought
curious
maybe
if we
my
can.
stapler was behind me. I think
Because I'm curious if we can pull any like lessons from what they did, and kind of how your interest waned with Supreme.
Yeah, I mean, I would say a few things. On a personal level, I definitely got very burnt out on the Supreme piece. And how many times can you like see a red box logo on a different thing before it's like, I can't do this 24/7. This is too much. So there's certainly that personal piece and component to it. And I think anyone who knows the Supreme community very well, it's still a very alive community and a very, successful brand, but it doesn't have that same sort of demand that it once had. And truthfully, I really do attribute a lot of that to Supreme selling the company and getting a new hands of new ownership who really was trying to increase profit margins and had a very short. And this, look, Supreme is owned by VF Corp, which is a publicly traded company. So like they're looking at next quarter earnings, and next quarter earnings is really all they can see through that lens. And so when that happens, you're like, yeah, let's ramp up supply, let's ramp up supply, let's ramp up supply. And that's great for your next quarter earnings, but is that really the best play for the long-term longevity of the brand? And I would say that's a component of it. I think the design elements have struggled a little bit in the last few years. Tremaine Emery's the new creative director, which I'm excited to see what he does. I tend to think that he's a good hire there, so I'm excited to see how that all goes. But in general, I think they really overproduced in a lot of categories. It used to be like, for example, you used to be able to go on in week one. So Supreme splits their season into the spring, summer, and the fall, winter. In the week one release of each collection, they would release a ton of items. And one of those items was always the bags. So you have like your backpacks and your shoulder bag and your fanny pack and things like that, right? And those used to always be like a guaranteed winner. You could go on week one, they would take 5 or 10 minutes to sell out. So it wasn't that hard to get them. You could go on, grab them, make 50 or $100 like that, like no questions asked. And then what happened after they got acquired was once they would sell out, well, now they started restocking the bags and restocking the bags and restocking the bags and having them all season. And now it's like, well, okay, there's not really a home run with those anymore. So I'm not even going to log on to Supreme this week, right? And I think that's just sort of a small example of what happened on a much broader scale with that company. And I think that company will go sort of the way of like the North Face or Vans or Nike. It might have a really long, great, successful run, but certainly the resale premium has dropped a lot in the last couple of years. And just the general excitement around the brand has dropped a lot in the last couple of years. So interested to see how they sort of take things, but feel like they're a little bit at a crossroads right now. Like, okay, where do we want to take this thing? Where do we want it to go?
But also, I think it's unique with fashion too. I know this interview is going all over the place, but I don't know if you saw, there was a documentary. It wasn't even that great, but it was about Von Dutch on Hulu, and how it was so popular, and all the celebrities, like that was back in the days of like Paris Hilton, and they were everywhere, and then all of a sudden they just weren't cool anymore because they like infiltrated everything, and it was everywhere, and then it just wasn't cool anymore. Something about like jumping the shark from a fashion brand.
Yeah. And with a lot of these companies that are like, I view fashion companies, I view NFT companies, I view even trading card companies to some extent as like marketing companies. And it's a
Yeah.
huge part of what they are. And if they really like look like they're trying too hard on too many things, it's not necessarily a good look and can make it look less cool. It's one of the things that Supreme captured so well is they were sort of secretly trying really hard behind the scenes, but their attempt to try hard was to make it look like they weren't trying hard. And they really fooled a lot of people on that for a really long time. And yeah, it's like, I don't even remember who it was, but I think there was like a Migos NBA Top Shot collab for like these new moments. And I was like, that feels like a try hard thing to me. Like that does not feel cool. That feels like over the top. And I know other people will think differently. That's purely an opinion. But certainly these are marketing companies, and particularly when the item you're selling is a digital item, like you're really a marketing company, and you're relying on your brand and your IP at the end of the day. So I view that as a huge component of it.
Yeah. So you're referencing when Quavo did a promotion with them.
Quavo. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he went to New York City. They had like a live event. He showed up on stage. But I agree, it didn't really feel very congruent. I'm curious do you think, just take it back to Top Shot for a second, do you think like if they were more aligned with current players, or like what do you think would make sense if you could just brainstorm something? Sometimes we brainstorm
What
ideas
would
on
make
the
sense
show.
from the marketing perspective? I mean, if you replaced Roham with myself right now, I would certainly want to make a very clear delineation of like, these are the high end products, these are the fun products, these are the challenge products, right? And they're very different. We're going to very clearly delineate what those are. I would also try to, in collectibles, physical collectibles, from where I come, there's a lot of demand and appreciation around consistency. So what I mean by that is, like, if you look back at let's go back to like early Prism basketball sets. So the 2012 Prism basketball release had 3 parallels. These are the different color variations. They had a silver, a green, and a gold being the only one that was sequentially numbered, limited to 10 copies. They have kept that numbered to 10 every single year of every single release. They've never changed it. They never strayed from it. And they've always had it in every single release. It's the only numbered parallel that is true for, right? So a lot of times too, like, you'll have a blue, and one set it's 199, another set it's 149, another set it's 125. And so you get into this situation where, like, in recent Prism basketball releases, there's still the gold number to 10. There's also like a green fast break number to 5, right? The gold number to 10 sells for more than the one number to 5, which on surface seems really weird. But it's because there's this consistency and this appreciation for this parallel that's existed for a really long time and has a real history. And so I would seek to come up with, what are the things that we are going to stick to and keep them the same year after year after year, where there's dependability around it, and we can create this history or whatever it is, where people know what to expect, and they know that they can come back to it and rely on it, and they know that it will be a staple of future products and will continue to be an important part of the NBA Top Shot picture. So those are a couple of things that I would do off the top. I don't know. I'm sure as I learned more and dug deeper, I'd have a lot more ideas and insights, but those are 2 things that I would certainly seek to do pretty early on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I wonder how you would do that at this point, because now we're in series 4 and there's been a lot of like jumping around, like you said. It's part of the reason why they still have slapped on that beta on the top left of the website. But like, I guess, do you think that that's something that you can do after the fact? So like in your Prism example, right? If it's not consistent the whole time, then how are you now going to create a consistency where you have like 4 years of sort of different numbers, different circulation, different sets, different everything?
I mean, one way to do that is to, I don't know what let's pretend, and I'm just going to make this up because I don't know, but let's pretend the first year it's 50, and the next year it's 100, and the next year it's 75, and the next year it's, 40. Well, what you could do is you could go and like incentivize people to burn to get those down to a singular level. And then you could be like, okay, look, now there's only 40 of each, right? So we got there. Great. Now there's slightly different names. We're going to change the naming system a little bit, but now there's only that many of each. And as I'm even thinking about it now, I'm like, that's another thing I would totally do, is like really incentivize people to burn a lot of moments. Cause that is a huge advantage of digital, is like knowing exactly how many there are and the ability to burn the moments. It's like a really, really cool and unique thing. And then the ability to like incentivize people to do that. Like if Topps was going to be like, all right, we're going to let you burn your base cards, like we'll literally send them in, we'll put them in an incinerator. It's like the unit economics of that wouldn't even make sense, because most of the base cards are worth a penny, like less than a penny. And so like, how do you get the card to Topps for them to burn it for, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Right. So like, I do think that is a huge advantage of digital, and one that if I was in charge of Top Shot would seek to really utilize and leverage in an important way. But it's a good question. If you haven't had that, if you're 4 years in or 4 seasons in and haven't had that consistency yet, how do you get there? I don't know, but that's an idea. There might be some logistical issues to actually make that work, but that's my sort of top of the mind thought for that.
Yeah, I think that deserves to show this video.
There you go.
That's pretty funny. I was like, what's the magic word?
Actually, I owe you one more, actually, because you said if you were Roham for the day.
Roham.
That's
Man.
you got a video for every action here, don't you?
I got a few. But yeah, burning is interesting. It's something that they're trying to do without pissing off their collectors, because then it's another difficult thing when people buy a bunch of stuff they like, and then you're like, all right, now get rid of it. And especially when some of those people bought at higher valuations because of,
Well, yeah, totally. But I would say, like, certainly not forcing people to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
Forced burns would be a really weird strategy to go about doing that. But if it's like, hey, I have this thing I really like and I don't want to get rid of it, well, I'll give you $10 for it. It's like, well, okay, well, I still don't want to get rid of it, right? So that shouldn't be too big of a problem for people that just want to keep the item, right? I would think not.
Yeah. So we have people asking for another video. Did you at one point say that you like the community? Was that something that you said?
I mean, I certainly made reference to the community. Yeah.
All right, well, there you go.
We love the community.
yeah, that's funny. Man, you got them all. You got them all. We just probably sit here and do a podcast for an hour of you playing all these different videos.
Oh, I definitely do that. Don't tempt me. But actually, so take it back to physical for 1 second, because there's a couple questions that I had. One of the physical cards that you show a lot are those artifact cards, the ones that you had over, what's his name again? The U.S. soccer player, Pulisic or something.
Mm-hmm.
Where do those cards come from, and how do you buy them? Because why are they so large? They're like this thick, and then you got like Babe Ruth, like a strand of George Washington's hair, and like, where are these cards all coming from?
So it sounds like you're referring to like these relic or memorabilia cards that have like a patch or a relic of some kind inside. Yeah. So most cards are put into packs, which are then put into boxes, and people will buy the boxes and open the box, and inside there'll be 12 or 24 or even one pack sometimes. And then you open the pack, and then inside of there, you'll find, sort of randomly inserted, you'll find these various different cards. So that's typically like how someone gets the card. But how does Topps or Panini make the card? I mean, Topps, for example, has a deal with the MLB where they're getting a certain number of game used jerseys every season. And so then they can cut those up and they can put them into trading cards and things like that. Now, there's also much more like sort of bespoke deals where Topps will go and buy up some of George Washington's hair from a random collector. And like, you may not know this, but presidential hair is like a thing that people collect. And there's like real collectors out there for that, as weird as that sounds. And so they can go and find it and buy it for someone who's got reasonable provenance, that it's verifiable, and they can go and put a strand of George Washington's hair in a card. And so that's a short version of how those cards get made. But yeah, there's definitely like, just as much as these companies are marketing businesses, I would say the physical sports card manufacturer companies are big logistics businesses, between trying to get everyone to sign all the autographs and making sure those are done on time, and sticker autographs versus on-card autographs, and trying to source all the relics, and then trying to do the league deals and keep the league deals and keep competitors out. Like, there's a big logistics business around that. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So then the way that people rip these is they're in boxes, obviously, because they can't be in a pack. That'd be too obvious. You'd shake it and you'd know something weird was inside.
Yeah, well, look, that's a real problem too, right? This is an advantage of digital, is particularly as it comes to like pack opening of digital cards. There's no way to search those. That's the terminology in sports cards, is pack searching. So what people will do is they will go and take like a little digital scale, like a weed scale basically, and they'll take it into Target, and they'll go and they'll put each pack on from like a box of cards, pack. Oh, this one's a gram more. Okay, I'm going to buy that one. And they can like reasonably know that that's going to be the pack that has like something good in it, right? Now, there's different places you can buy from where you pretty verifiably know they aren't going to search the packs. Like these big distribution companies aren't going through and like searching packs. Or it's much easier to search a single pack than it is an entire sealed box, right? So there's all sorts of ways that you can sort of be more and more certain about that. But even there's something in cards called a case hit. So these boxes are then normally put into what's called cases, which are these basically brown sealed cardboard boxes that have a certain number of sealed boxes inside of them. So typically, like a common configuration for cards would be like 8 cards per pack, 24 packs per box, 12 boxes per case. Okay. So then like you can even buy them on the sealed case level, which is like virtually impossible to search. But also what happens is you have these case hits that fall one per case. Someone will go and buy a case. They'll rip these boxes open until they find the case hit, and say they get the case hit in the third box, and they'll take their 9 boxes and put them on eBay as single boxes. So like you want to be careful where you're buying packs and boxes from, and certainly the searching problem is a real problem. But you know, there are ways that you can be generally pretty safe around it. There's ways that you can be really safe around it, like buying direct from manufacturer and things of that nature. But yeah, just be aware where you buy from, I think is a big part of that.
Interesting. I never even knew about that until today. That's very interesting. I didn't realize sickos were buying cases. I guess that makes sense. And not only that, but I saw that you probably even shared it, that some of these guys, they buy the boxes and then they're opening it, and then there's a giveaway. There's something gives them away that like Tops marked a pack or a box to let them know something.
Yeah,
there.
Look, there were certainly some suspect things in that category, and I'm not fully convinced that there's not a lot of shady business in where certain cards are going and being dealt, and that's a huge. And I could be entirely wrong about that thesis, and I'm sure it's happened somewhere along the way in some product line for some company. But as it being like a bigger, broader issue, it may not really be one. But I'm also not 100% sure, and that's like a huge advantage of blockchain and digital, is being able to see and verify all that. And you know, I would say, like, as I've sort of said before, I love physical, I love digital. I'm excited by both. There's big advantages to both. There's big disadvantages to both. And I think, you know, being the type of person that's willing to accept that and excited about playing in both of those different categories is a good thing.
Have you ever gotten scammed? I've gotten scammed. I bought tickets to a Tame Impala show, and I showed up and I was dumbfounded when they scanned it and it was flashing red.
That's that's brutal. That's not, I mean, I know, like, back when I was in college and was using like all my money to buy Supreme and Flip Supreme, I had like a pretty nice box logo hoodie, the Flags box logo hoodie, and I shipped it to a guy on eBay, and he's like, it had a stain on it, I'm returning it. I'm like, this is weird. He returns it, I get an empty box back, and like eBay sided with him, and he got my $500. And at the moment, that was like a really, you know, crushing thing for me. And I was like, I'm never using eBay again. And the guy like posted pictures on his Snapchat of him like wearing the hoodie, and I found it. I'm like, come on, this is whack. Yeah, look, I mean, there are scammers in every market, from the most illegitimate the most illegitimate of markets, tongue twister, to the most legitimate of markets. And so like the fact that scammers exist within a certain market should not be an indicator that that market is to be avoided at all costs.
Sure. But it sounds like you haven't had experiences at least buying like physical cards that were fakes or anything like that.
Fake physical cards are probably way more rare than you would think, actually. Really, like, the printing technology on most of the modern stuff is pretty hard to fake, and companies like PSA are really good at pointing out the fakes when they do happen. To get that level of detail right, particularly when you're talking about like these older sets, right? Like, you have to get paper from 1986 to print 1986 cards on, or else you could be able to tell pretty quickly that this is not going to be legit. And they're putting these things under like 100x magnification, looking at them and seeing the printing qualities and techniques. It's like, it's harder to fake that stuff than you think. And like, I can't remember the last time I've seen a good fake in the wild of a trading card.
That's fair. And also, I forgot, if you're dealing directly with PSA, then of course it's very unlikely you're going to receive a fake. So then I take it you're not buying stuff from eBay of people who haven't gotten it graded.
Well, actually, I buy a ton of ungraded and then grade it myself. But I have never once had a card come back as fake from PSA. It's never once happened. I've had autograph cards where they say like, we're uncertain, like things like that is probably like the worst that's ever happened. I've had 1 or 2 cards where it comes back and it didn't hit what's called the min size requirement. So there's a worry that the card may have been trimmed to make an edge or corner sharper. But never a fake, never once a fake.
Got it. Well, here's a question for a physical card collector. Is PSA the best grading service? Are there any other blue chip grading? Is there still that like backlog on PSA where they're like, we can't grade your card for another?
PSA is pretty through the backlog. I mean, there was a point where they had, a multi-million card backlog. I think it was like, I don't even know the number. I think it was like 10 million plus, which is ridiculous. And they were charging $300 to grade any new card that you were going to grade. The minimum was $300 to grade it.
Wow.
Now they're down to, I think the lowest service level is $19 a card, which is like very reasonable. So, you know, they are more or less through that backlog. The other grading companies that get sort of put in that conversation would be SGC, BGS, companies like that. To me, PSA is the gold standard. I mean, if you even look behind me here, like you'll see I got some graded cards over, it's backwards on the stream, over here, over here, and over here. They're all in PSA holders, as you can see. So I'm a big believer in PSA, but yeah, I mean, look, there's also really high sale prices of other graded cards too. And I think in most collecting communities, BGS, SGC also accepted. I would say like vintage soccer stickers. I would never buy a BGS holdered vintage soccer sticker because I know they've passed a lot of fakes and trimmed and altered cards through. But yeah, I would say personally, PSA is the gold standard.
All right. And there was actually a comment from before that's related, which is Robbie asked, advice on where to take your collection if you want to gauge its value without worrying about getting fleeced. So I take it maybe he's talking about those like Beckett books or something, or what do you think? Is there like a pawn shop style thing where you just take a bunch of your cards and someone tells you what it's worth, or how does that work?
That's a good question. It's gonna be a little bit like there's not an ultimate source of truth on this, but a few places I would start. I'm a big fan of eBay's completed listings and just going and looking at. So you can go and search whatever particular card that you think might be valuable. You can go and search it on eBay, and then on the left side of the screen, if you're on desktop or on mobile, it'll be on the other side. You can go and select completed listings, and then from there select sold listings, and so that will only show you listings that have actually sold. Now, the other caveat to that is sometimes these don't get paid for. So if you see a really huge outlier, you can just sort of guess like, okay, well, that was a stupid shill bid transaction. I'm not going to look at that one. But generally speaking, you can go and get a really good idea of what a single card is worth by doing that. Checking Golden's sold listings, Heritage's sold listings, depending on the collectible, right? Like for video games, I'm usually checking Heritage because they just have the biggest backlog of sold video games, right? So I'll go and look at, I'll search WADA, Monkey Ball, and see what they have that's sold, right? And typically they're the place to go and see video games. And cards are going to be more like eBay, Golden, places like that. Tickets, Golden, and Heritage, right? So depending on what collectible category you're talking about, I'd look different places, but typically you want to see sales data. Yeah, I see someone calling out 130.2. That's definitely a place you can go and look at some previous sales data as well. I use Card Ladder sometimes for these older, 3, 5, 10-year-old comps on eBay. So, all these different resources I would use, but there's no hard and fast rule. I would say most people who ask that question have cards from like the 80s and 90s that aren't worth that much. And so like 80s, 90s, you're mostly looking for like Jordan. And outside of that, there's like, I mean, you might have a Griffey rookie if you're in baseball, and those can be worth a few bucks. But there's a certain era in there where there's not too many valuable cards. But anyway, hopefully that's somewhat helpful to answer your question. And if you're really unsure, I try to get through my Twitter DMs, and you can send me a DM and a picture of some stuff, but I certainly miss quite a few of those too. So that's my best advice there.
Yeah, I mean, about that, like, it's pretty cool how you were able to pivot over to collecting something very unlike streetwear and having success there. So that shows you, I think, that people are really interested in physical cards, and I think, at least for me personally, I forgot what you called them now. It wasn't the artifact cards or something else.
The relics cards. Yeah.
The relics.
Memorabilia, relic. Yep. Those both work.
The relics to me are like incredible. Like as someone who hasn't collected physical cards since I was about 10 years old. When I see anything that you share about those relic cards, it's like, it always blows my mind. Like, this is the coolest thing I've ever
those
seen.
are really cool, but I will also add, like, you got to be so careful with those nowadays, because what's happened is, like, particularly as there was, not a lot of games being played because of COVID and some supply chain issues, like, these companies started to write on the back of the card, like, there's different like levels. On the back, it's like, this card is, includes a piece of a game worn jersey from David Ortiz, right? And you're like, okay, game worn, great. That's like tier 1. Tier 2 is player worn. And there's like funny photos of Mark Ingram at like an old Topps photo shoot wearing like 30 jerseys at once, because they just like slide it on, slide it on, slide it on, slide it off, slide it off, slide it off. It's like player worn, great, player worn. That's like tier 2. That's okay. Player worn is okay. It's not as good as game worn though, obviously, right? And then there's tier 3, which is like, and it was literally says on the back of the card in fine print, is the enclosed and officially licensed memorabilia on the front of this card is not from any specific game, player, or event. And I jokingly call those the Dick's Sporting Good patches. Those are just like those are basically like they went and bought these things somewhere and just cut them up and put them in the cards, and they have no significance whatsoever. So if you are buying cards, I would always, particularly relic cards, I would always recommend reading the back of the card first and knowing, is it game worn, is it player worn, is it the Dick's Sporting Good patch. And typically for like the Dick's Sporting Good patch cards, I view them as if if this card had no relic in it, what would I value it at? Sort of how I try to think about that. So you probably can guess I own very few of those. I see Dr. Dunk saying pretty interesting that Eric has apparently never had a Top Shot account. I do have a Top Shot account. And I haven't even talked about this, funny enough, on this sort of Top Shot podcast, is my Top Shot personal experience. Which is I had a meeting with Roham, and I had never used Top Shot before. And I'm like, okay, well, before I meet with him, I'm going to go and like buy a couple packs. Like I need to see this experience and like really understand a little bit more about the product. So I went on, bought a few packs of like the regular Series 1 packs. They were just sitting there readily available. I bought, I don't know, I think I put 20 or 30 bucks in.
So when is this, by the way?
Man, I don't know. It was
do
like
you think it's December 2020? January
it was before Top Shot blew up.
So probably December or January.
Yeah, probably in that range, right? And so then I go and meet with Roham, and cool, and really like had a great conversation, really nice guy. I do think very highly of him. Then, funny enough, it's like a month or two later, I'm like, oh man, Top Shot's blowing up. Like, let me go like see what these are worth. I went and they were worth like $3,000. And I literally went and sold all of them except like one. I think I kept, I don't know, like a Devin Booker or something. And I went from like $15 to $3,000 in like a month. I'm like, oh wow, this is great. So like my NBA Top Shot experience has been awesome. I'm like, you never time to top that sort of that well by like sheer strategy. I just got really lucky and sort of timed the top of it. But I like bought them cheap for when they were readily available, sold them at the top, and like it was a great experience. So certainly not in a position of like having lost any money or having never dealt with it. I actually had a really great experience with it when I used it.
Wow. Well, congrats. What is your Grail physical card that you own? I'm curious about that.
That I own. I can tell you the Grail physical card that I don't own. That might be easier.
Okay.
So I'm a big collector of the Prism World Cup sets, as I mentioned, and the 2014 Prism World Cup set in particular to me is one that's going to have a lot of longevity in the collecting space. And I collect the gold prisms, so obviously the Messi gold is a big one for me that I don't have. That's probably certainly a six-figure card. I don't know if it's touching 200,000 yet, but it's probably in that range. And there's one up for auction that ends in like 6 days that I have my eyes on. It's at 50,000, but I'm not going to be playing in the 200,000 range, but maybe in the 100,000 range, I'll push some chips in. But there's also a black 1 of 1 of every card in that set. And no one knows where the Messi is. No one knows if it's been pulled. If it hasn't been pulled, it has never surfaced publicly that I'm aware of. And I don't think anyone spent more time looking at these cards than I have. So, that card I think is probably $1 million+ card. And to me, one of the best trading cards ever made, period. And so if there was any Grail for me, it would be that one. But good luck getting it, I guess I would say to myself, because one, no one knows where it is. And two, if it does surface, it's probably a 7-figure card. So.
Wow. And another question for you is, so when you were talking about how much like research you're doing every day, are you just waking up and in between waking up and going to sleep, you're like buying and selling and researching tradables and just kind of trading all day long? Or I'm curious, just you in your personal life, like how are you able to do all this researching and trading, and how dedicated are you to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say I certainly have the benefit of, working full time in the space as a creator, right? So it's like, it's work when I'm on eBay searching through stuff and looking at sales data and trying to find, new and interesting trends to talk about and make posts about. So there's that piece of it where it's like, I don't have that typical 9 to 5 or anything like that where I have to go in and can't be paying attention to this stuff. So, and the other part of it is like, I truly love it. I really, really enjoy it and think it's really fun and really interesting and exciting. And so when it is like midnight and I'm laying in bed on my phone and like scrolling through different things and looking at things, like it's really fun to me. So it doesn't feel so much like work. So, just sort of, I would say sort of fortunate to be in that situation, but yeah, I mean, I certainly am paying attention to any big sales, big auctions. I've got group texts with people that are also looking at stuff and pinging me on things when they see cool things and stuff like that. So, definitely I'm not a one-man army here, but I certainly spend a lot of my time looking at the stuff and do really enjoy it.
Cool. So do you have direct relationships with like other brands that are like partnering with you with the content that you're creating online, or?
Yep. So quite a few that we've done deals with. I mean, And it's, I know that you're like pointing out the Twitter, which is like Twitter. I love Twitter and is like my favorite platform right now, and the one that I'm putting the most focus on, just sort of strategically for a number of reasons. I think that Twitter is in a really good space to become even more and more relevant in the coming years. But I also have a very big following on TikTok and Instagram, and I think over 2.2 million across platforms. So
Wow.
doing some of those deals is, yeah, it's, companies have worked with companies like StockX and Puma and Skechers and whatnot, and PSA and Golden now, and companies like that. So yeah, there's a lot of cool ones and a lot of great partners. And like I said, So Rare's in that mix now too. So yeah, it's when you start reaching a certain number of people, it's definitely you're definitely able to sell sort of against those views and make a career out of it. So I've been fortunate enough to do that, and that's the story there.
That's awesome. Well, that's interesting that you're on TikTok. Like I look at TikTok sometimes too, and sometimes I think about sharing videos about that I look at TikTok, like just ridiculous things for this audience. I think that they might get some enjoyment out of that. Some of these
Yeah,
guys
TikTok's a
don't.
very, very interesting place. I'm like, it's funny. It's my biggest audience by a long shot, and I'm still just like, I don't really like this platform that much. So is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I watch the guy dancing and eating, the fat guy, and he's making his belly go up and down, and like he just makes the same video over and over. I can't stop watching. So what can I say? Um,
Yep, there's some people like that for sure.
All right. Well, let's see if there are any other questions for Eric while we've got him.
Yeah, I'd love to
Otherwise,
do like a speed round here. Like and hit me with the hard questions. I'm here for it.
all right, guys.
I'm not easily offended. So hit me with your best shot. Let's see what we got.
All right, guys. Hit Eric with some hard questions. We'll give you a few minutes to see what kind of questions you can come up with. Let me take a look at any other questions I had bookmarked here. What about, I know you did talk about sort of in broad terms about physical and digital and how the two can sort of play nice together. Um, are you hearing any other, like how are your other group texts, let's say, talking about digital, whether it's So Rare, whether it's Top Shot, whether it's Panini, whatever? um what are these people saying? Do they think like the timing is right? Do they like this stuff? Are there things they don't like? What are the people that you trust in the physical space? What are they saying?
A lot of people that I trust in the physical space don't really talk about it that much, I think.
Yeah.
There's some people that I really trust that do talk about it, right? Like some close personal friends that don't have big social followings that I know are big spenders and big believers in collectibles as a whole that really like a lot of the NFT projects. And people too, like Evan Vanderberg at Dibs, right? Who's someone who really understands like this sort of the things that are going on between digital and physical and the overlap, and everyone at Rally, right? Like Rob at Rally, and how they do physical assets and digital assets when they offer these fractionalized ownership and things like that. So there's certainly people that I trust that really think deeply about the space, but then there's also people too, like Ken Golden, who's a gangster, like awesome dude and really knows his stuff. Like I just don't think he's paying that much attention to NFTs because he's carved out an incredible lane in trading cards and sports memorabilia. So he's like, I'm happy with that, and I'm happy with my comics and video games, and maybe there's a play at NFTs in there somewhere, but like that's sort of just a secondary thing for him right now. And the lane that he's carved out is incredible and keeps him very, very busy, right? So I've certainly, of the people I really trust, I've never seen anyone be threatened by it. Of the people that I really trust, and I've certainly seen a few people that I really trust be really excited by it too. So I would say it ranges from just not thinking about it that much to, hey, I see a real future for this and think this is important, but never the people that are like, this stuff's terrible, get it out of here.
Okay. So Jeb's shown up a little bit late because he did talk about his past with Supreme. But is there anything, I guess you could answer the second part of this. Are you still collecting streetwear? Jeb's a big streetwear collector. He's got like he's got storage lockers filled
Jeb
with
Bush. I don't know if Jeb
t-shirts.
Bush was a streetwear collector. Yeah, I still dabble. I still buy stuff just for fun, but I would view myself in that particular category as less of a collector and more of just like I just buy things when I like them. That's, I'm not like on every Supreme weekly buying things every single week, but every season I'll drop in 4 or 5 times and buy a couple things here or there. So, not what it used to be, but I still certainly enjoy it and will occasionally buy things from time to time.
Got it. John is saying, do you have any plans to buy those beautiful purple unique So Rare cards?
I would love to. I'd also love to win some. So, I'm still like, I'm working my way up in the so rare world right now, where I'm like, I'm doing those like academy intermediate and stuff like that, like working my way up. Cause like I just know from sports cards that some of my earliest buys were some of my worst because I thought I knew more than I did. Um, and now, so I'm like, okay, I'm buying some limiteds. I'm like hitting a couple rares here and there, but like I haven't made the big splashes yet. But as I play more, as I learn more, as I understand more, and start to really craft my thesis around so rare and where the best place is to store capital within that, I certainly hope to have some good unique squads, and we'll see where that nets out.
Seattle's asking, what are your top 3 sports? Is your number 1 soccer? That's my question.
Number one is definitely soccer from both for me from the investment and personal perspective. I played soccer my whole life and love watching games and think that, with the size of the sport and the supply of the product, it makes a lot of sense. So that's one. I mean, you can see behind me here too. It's like I'm a Philly sports guy, so I've got Eagles over here and Sixers over there, and I would say my second is probably actually baseball. I love the Philadelphia Phillies, and that's my start in cards was baseball, as it was for many people in the early 2000s. But if you made me go 3, I'd go soccer, baseball, basketball.
Fair. What do you think about Ronaldo going and playing in Saudi Arabia?
I say good for him. He's getting a ton of money, and he almost would have been, I like personally think he almost would have been stupid to do anything else for that amount of money that he's getting.
No,
I know he's getting like a lot of hate, but I mean, dude, the guy's like setting himself and generations and generations of his family up forever. So, good for him and more power to him. Is it the best move for my Ronaldo cards? Like maybe not, but like, if I was him, I don't know that I would have done anything differently.
Oh, of course not. I mean, that I feel like that part of the question should just be obvious. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
of course. If someone offers you like $1 billion to kick a ball into a net, you're gonna say okay.
Yeah.
But I think from just like the legacy standpoint, it's kind of a bummer. Although I'm sure Messi's gonna be playing on like the Florida Pelicans next year or something, or whoever the MLS team that he'll go to. So Dr. Dunks, any possibility you will cover Top Shot on Twitter? I think you have a little bit.
I have here and there. And I think there was another question here about, how do So Rare and Top Shot sort of like, what are their synergies and like, how do they sort of combine? I think it was actually the first one you had up, and maybe I read it wrong, but I thought it was like asking me to compare those a little bit. But I do think that they have carved out very separate sort of lanes. Like and sort of how I don't view digital and physical as like hugely competitive. I don't know that I view Top Shot and So Rare as hugely competitive, because So Rare at the end of the day is a game, right? And it's a fantasy game where you're winning various prizes, both cards and ETH and things like that. And the thing about So Rare, that one of the things I love is in sports cards, like if you want to talk about soccer, you're pretty much only talking about goal scorers as the cards that really maintain value and go up over time, minus like the few legends in their position, right? But in So Rare, it's like all of a sudden, a random left back who's playing very well is worth a lot of money, right? And so the card prices in So Rare, from what I can ascertain, move like just really in line with player performance. And it's almost exclusive, like the values are almost exclusively built off of the level of rarity and the player performance. Cards aren't like that. Like even if you look at football, like some of the great wide receivers and running backs are like not touching Davis Mills prices, right? Like it's things like that where, I think So Rare has an interesting sort of, they're more of a game, and I would view Top Shot as, at least in my sort of dream state of Top Shot, as more of like a true collectible. And also So Rare is players, it's not moments, right? And Top Shot is showing a highlight and has the moment, right? So there's some definite differences in there. And I don't know that I've seen anyone switch from one to the other, and in the same way that I haven't seen anyone switch from physical to digital and stay there. I think there's probably a lot of people that do both, but I don't know if I view them as such a threat to each other, and think they have carved out sort of their own lanes here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there are definitely some people who were very gung-ho on Top Shot who have jumped a little bit of a ship to So Rare. Some of the creators, some of them probably in this chat. But anyhow, are there any Grail Ajax collectibles that you know of?
I have Johan Cruyff's ticket to his first game for the Netherlands, if you want to count that, his first appearance for the Dutch national team. So I'm a big Johan Cruyff fan and believer. Trying to think who else might have some cool Ajax stuff. I mean, Zlatan has his early cards. He's not Ajax. Yeah, I don't know. I love Cruyff. Cruyff to me is the greatest soccer player of all time. So that's where my emphasis is going to go when I'm thinking of Ajax.
All right, I got to Google that because I'm not aware of that player. So I'll have to do my homework.
Johan Cruyff. He's one of the less talked about players, but any real soccer head will have him in their top 5 all-time players ever. And I think if you have him outside the top 5, that's then there needs to be some reconsideration of that list.
You know what's actually really cool, by the way, about soccer that I want to talk about for 1 second. So whenever the World Cup happens, it obviously like engages my interest in soccer every time. Like I love watching the World Cup. I don't really love watching club football. Maybe one day I will. But and now Pele was just sick and Pele died, and I was looking at some like old clips. And what really struck me was how the old clips of soccer play still hold up. And like when you look at old like basketball clips, the style has completely changed and it just looks so rigid and strange.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I would like attribute that to a couple of things. One is like soccer's an old sport that's played all over the world in a lot of places. 2 is there's this weird phenomenon in sports in the early days of sports where people thought the average body type was the superior body type for all sports. They're like, you want the right proportions. You want to be like, 5'11", 6 foot. And like, you don't want really tall. You don't want really short. And then like people realized there were these advantages to having these sort of unique bodies. It's like, if you look at the greatest Olympic marathon runners and the greatest Olympic swimmers, I forget the marathon runner's name, but one of the most, the winningest marathon runners is like, I think a foot shorter than Michael Phelps, but their waists are the exact same height, right? Because in swimming, it really benefits you to have a really long torso and short legs. And in running, it's the opposite. And so like, I think soccer just by chance sort of happens to be the sport where like average body types actually do sort of prevail. And basketball, that's obviously not the case, right? So when you go back and look at old basketball clips, you're like, oh, this is like the janitors and like whatever, right? And it kind of was, but there was this weird sort of philosophy in sports back then that the average body type was like the ideal body type for all sports.
And what do you think about Haaland? Isn't he like the biggest hit right now in soccer?
That's a great question. I think like maybe the first time I ever watched him play, I was like, this might be the best player I've ever seen in my life. He's so good. He's unfathomably good. Now, the question for him, I mean, there's a couple of questions. Obviously, whenever you're buying a young player and trading cards or any collectible, there's a real risk to that because anything can happen, injuries, mental health issues, all that stuff. So there's that risk of, some sort of injury or freak accident or whatever it is that could derail a career. But the other question mark around Haaland is he's Norwegian, and Norway is not a great soccer country. And it's like, if he's not making the World Cup, is that going to kill his legacy? Because you'll notice he was not in the 2022 World Cup. I think that squad will be good enough that it makes it in 26. And I think they're expanding from 36 to 48 teams, I want to say as well. Yeah. But so those things could all be helpful. But that's like the bigger question mark around Haaland right now is, at least in the collectible space, like, will his country's lack of success, could that be a real deterrent to people who are interested in collecting him? And could that really hurt his prices long term? But as far as individual talent goes, he is in that next wave of like the GOAT conversation. Like, I think it's going to be like Mbappe and Haaland. And then if there's like maybe one person from the out, like that next group of like Vinicius and Bellingham and Foden or something like that. Like someone else in that tier will jump up, maybe Musiala, someone in there. But I think it's going to be like Mbappe, Haaland are like solidified in with excluding any injury issues. Like they're solidified as like the next people to be having that GOAT debate about.
So I guess a 2-part question. One, is Haaland the top priced rookie, so to speak, right now? Or the top priced card when you rip a card out of these modern packs?
Yeah, so it's interesting because so much of it is dependent on the year that a rookie started, right? So Mbappe has this really interesting situation where there's a sticker of him from 2016, a Panini sticker, but then he also has a 2017 Topps Chrome card, and he's got some 2018 cards, and people sort of like lump them all in as rookie cards. It's one of the things that frustrates me about cards is I don't think that there is a very clear definition of what a rookie card really is. I wish that was a little bit more crystallized, but so he's in a situation where it's like, if he didn't have a 2016 sticker, could that bump the prices up of his 2017 stuff up a little more? I think it would, right? So his 2017 Topps Chrome stuff, though, and his 2018 Prism World Cup stuff is very expensive, as is Erling Haaland's 2019 Topps Chrome stuff, right? So some of it just depends on what years these players were rookies, what products came out during those years, but those two certainly among in terms of modern rookies, guys that are like, I would say 2014 to present rookies, those guys are 1A and 1B depending on how you slice them.
Cool. And my second question actually has nothing to do with Holland. It's actually, are you still playing soccer?
I wish I was. I need to get back into it, man. I've had my fair share of injuries over the years, ACLs and all that fun stuff. So yeah, I need to find a league up here in the Northeast somewhere to play. But, and I know this is like sort of a funny thing to say, but truthfully, I would like to get into soccer coaching. Like I want to be successful enough with this collectibles thing that I can like not leave it behind, but like sell off a part of it and then be like, hey, you know what? I'm okay. I can put this away in ETFs for a while and let it sit and take a soccer coaching salary and not be worried. And so I'm like, that's my dream, is to coach college soccer. And this will sound like a little bit crazy, but I have like aspirations to build the winningest program in NCAA history in the world of soccer if I ever am fortunate enough to get over there. So yeah, it's I would love to play again, and I think my path to playing again might be to just jump in practice as a coach. So we'll see how that goes. I do have a year of eligibility left. Funny enough, I had some injuries along the way, so I always tell my dad, who's looking for a head coaching job, if anyone knows anyone with a D3, D2 opening for college soccer, let me know. But if my pops gets a D3 head coaching job, I may like just risk it all and go back and like play again. So we'll see, but it's certainly a love, and I do miss the pitch.
Just stretch those legs, those ankles, those knees, and who knows? And hopefully you do achieve that goal, and then we can go back to the stream and say, look, he put it in.
I've never really said that publicly before. I don't talk about that too much, so I guess you get a little insider thing.
There you go, on an NBA Top Shot stream. Let's see what else we got here. Anything that you would criticize, or are you allowed to offer any things that you'd like to see improve on So Rare, or is that
no, I don't. They would let me say whatever I believe. They don't want to like hold me to some party line. The thing is, truthfully, like, I vetted a lot of these companies, right? And like I talked to a lot of, without saying who, I talked to a lot of NFT collectible companies, and really decided to go with So Rare in this particular instance because I believe in what they do. Does that mean that I think that everything they do is exactly right and there's no room for improvement? Like, of course not, right? Like, even as I look, I'm like, you know what? I think it's a little confusing to me that there's a higher print run on the NBA stuff than the soccer stuff. It's like, I sort of wish that wasn't the case. And there's always like, I'm curious how they're going to do some of the print runs in the future, and if they're going to keep it the same, or if they're going to up them, or if they're going to lower the NBA or raise soccer. And some of that uncertainty, makes me a little bit scared to like dip into some of these other categories. Right. So, it's like, do I want to go and buy a rare card limited to 10 if I'm worried that might be to 100 next season? And the answer to like those questions will be yes. In a lot of situations, I'll still probably decide to buy a lot of those, as I have bought some of those already. But no, it doesn't preclude me from being like, oh, hey, this could be better. Am I going to go out and like make a post about how like So Rare is like the worst in the world? Like, of course not. But like, I don't believe that either. So it's okay. I talked to a lot of companies and did my due diligence before I ended up with So Rare.
Cool. Do you have any thoughts on VR and collectibles in VR, like virtual? I would actually expand that question to like metaverse. What are your thoughts there? I always think that's a very interesting
I think
thing.
There's some level of inevitability around metaverse in the long future, but I think it's a longer future than people realize. There are a lot of VR headsets that exist out there, but very far from mass adoption as it relates to people actually integrating that into their daily lives. Now there's a huge bounty on that if anyone can figure it out, right? Like, obviously Facebook cares deeply about this and is investing a lot of resources into it, but also sort of burning capital hand over fist quarter after quarter. So we'll see how long that sort of mission lasts before there might be some pullback there. But I do think there's really great and exciting applications for VR. I'm personally more excited about AR than VR, but I think like this digital showroom where you can put your headset on and go see someone's collection and talk to your buddies, like that's a really cool thing. Who wouldn't be excited about that?
Yeah. I agree. I also think AR makes more sense than VR. I don't want to be on I don't want like a big sweaty thing over my head. Like I don't even like wearing the cup headphones for that matter. Like your
Yeah,
ears,
yeah.
are they hot right now? Your ears? What's the temperature
I don't
like
know.
on
I
your
wasn't
ears?
thinking about it till you brought it up. It's like it's one of those things where it's like you are now like realizing how your fingers feel. Like
Yeah, we are able to do that, aren't we? All right, well, let's see if there's anything else. I feel like you already answered this, but if there's anything else you want to add on thoughts on Dapper Labs, I mean, I do think it's interesting how you talked to Roham in the early days. Is there anything else actually that like happened during that conversation with Roham?
um I don't know anything like really noteworthy. I know it was a 30-minute call like a year and a half ago, so I don't like
Yeah,
exactly remember everything that went down. Nothing too crazy that I can remember, but um, yeah. Look, the truth is, I'm excited to see where it goes as much as anything, and um, I love all these collectibles categories, and I love that there's a community around Top Shot that's really excited by it, and maybe I'll be a bigger, deeper part of that community one day. And I certainly like I have Own the Moment as a tab on my browser where like I click on it and check it every now and then and look at some of the stats and some of the data, right? So like I'm paying attention. And I think it's, anytime that there's new IP that's built and a new collectible category that's built, it's really exciting to me. So I'm not sure where in 10, 20 years we'll be talking about it. Is there a path to it being way more important than it is now? I think there is. Is there a path to it being less important than it is now? I also think that's a possibility too. So I don't know that I have any super strong opinions on which way it's going to go, but I certainly see a path to either of those. And I just am sort of excited to watch it all unfold over the coming years.
fair enough. And also, do you have any thoughts? I know you also mentioned like Panini, and do you know about Candy as well for the baseball
Yeah,
collectibles?
I
And
know about Candy. I know probably the least about Candy of the three. I think what they're doing with tickets is a cool concept, and I went to a World Series game this year because my Phillies were in it, and I like tried every trick in the book to get them to print a physical ticket for me, and they wouldn't. Because I'm like, hey, like, what do I do if I lost my ticket? They're like, it's on, like, well, it should be on your phone. I'm like, what do I do if I lost my phone? They're like, we will write your seat number on a sticky note and hand it to you. I'm like, okay. Like I was trying to get a physical ticket printed. And so, on one hand, I'm like bummed that those are phasing out, but I do see like a real future in digital tickets as well. And
yeah.
I know that they're in part working on that. So from the Candy perspective, that's probably the single piece that's most interesting to me there.
Fair. Cool. And then Ryan here is probably a little late because I think you talked about this already, but how do you think more cardboard collectors can be welcome to digital collecting?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, probably like just less Twitter feuds, and that's probably more so the fault of physical card collectors than digital ones. But I just see these arguments because I mean, when I'm making posts about physical and digital and liking both, it's like I see the infighting between the two communities all the time. So I just think open arms and not trying to be exclusionary, not trying to hate on the things other people are collecting are all great sort of things to do in life in general, but also probably actually good for the thing that you're collecting if you have a welcoming community.
Cool. And is there anything else that's like starting up right now? I guess this could probably be the last question, but is there anything else that's kind of starting up right now that you've got an eye on that doesn't really have much of any momentum, but that you think is interesting?
uh yeah, there's always like stupid things that I'm into because I just like I dig so deep on this stuff.
Give it to us.
Yeah, so I'll give you two.
Okay.
One is movie ticket stubs. I think are cool. I think
Mhm.
they're cooler than they are valuable but they're really not that valuable.
Yeah.
But it's like, could I see some world where some of those become valuable? It's like, yeah, and I've got like the midnight premiere tickets for a lot of the Star Wars movies and Spider-Man movies, and I'm like, I can make a case for those being cool longer term. And PSA does great movie tickets, which is very cool. The other ones you'll see behind me here, up here, you got like Roller Coaster Tycoon,
Yeah, I
Backyard
saw that.
Baseball.
The PC
Um,
games.
like it's only a matter of time until WATA grades PC games. And PC games are awesome, man. Like everyone has good memories playing some PC game, whether it's Roller Coaster Tycoon or Backyard Baseball, Spy Fox, Freddy Fish, Putt Putt, and so to me, like and I pay attention there. Like I have Roller Coaster Tycoon searches saved, and I see every sealed copy that comes up, and there aren't many at all. So like, I buy them every time that I can. But at some point, it is inevitable that PC games will be graded. And then when that happens, I think there's going to be, a market around it the same way there's a market around GameCube and PlayStation and all those other systems. So, the PC games is like a fun outsider category where things are really cheap, but it might be a 5-year play until they're really, reasonably graded.
Awesome. I just imagine that you must have rooms and rooms of just so much stuff. Like I wonder if you showed us. I mean, obviously you're not going to, but like, where is all this stuff being kept? I'm
in my apartment here, so I got most of the damages on this wall. I vault a lot of stuff too, which is a very helpful tool. And so. Yeah.
You mean like you have a vault, or you use these like online providers?
I use the online providers. Yeah. So I'll use online providers to vault different cards and collectibles and just have it be insured and not worry about it too much. So
yeah, that sounds smart. And that's actually something that you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I imagine that would be the play to make digital and physical, like kind of vice versa. Like you look something digital and then it gives you something in a vault as you just like.
Yeah. Look, I think it's one of the reasons I love physical collectibles is my sort of dream state of physical collectibles is they're digitized, but you can't really, I don't know, physicalize a digital item, right? And so I think like this world where we have the digital asset that represents a physical asset that exists somewhere else, and those digital assets trading, interchangeably across different platforms and different marketplaces is really interesting to me. I sort of hate the word, but I've heard it called phygital, physical digital combination. But I think we will see a lot happen in the next 3 to 5 years as it relates to the digitization of physical assets, physical collectibles.
So I think that answers this question. I think the future is more digital.
Yeah, I agree with that. But it also might be more physical than you think too, right? Like it might be both. It might be more of both in a weird way.
Okay, so 50-50, it's going to be both. Well, I don't really have anything else. I feel like we asked a lot of questions, covered a lot of ground. I could have gone even further down that rabbit hole if I just watched more of your TikToks, but hopefully.
Hey, don't waste your time doing too much of that.
What percentage? Well, I guess let's see what this is.
Yeah,
we'll
how
read it together.
How about we end with this one? Yeah, what percent of your collecting attention strategy is? This is like, it's funny because I'm going to give a similar answer to how I talked about physical versus digital. The answer is like 100% of both. I think that people often view that as like, do you collect for fun or do you collect to make money? The answer is like, yes, I do both. I love both of these things. Like I buy things that I think are cool and exciting, but I also think that collectors happen to be the best investors because they know what speaks to them. And that probably also speaks to other people. And, newsflash, you can't take stuff with you when you die, right? And so like at some point, all this stuff's going to get sold, whether it's, even if it's after I'm gone, it's going to get sold, right? So it's like when it does get sold, I hope it sells for more money than I bought it for. I sure hope so. So, I would say my answer to that is both. There are a few things in my collection, which maybe is like 3 to 5% of my collection. Where I'm like, I know this is worthless, but it just speaks to me. But the overwhelming majority, I would say the answer is actually both.
Awesome. Well, Eric, thank you so much for making the time. Little did I know that I had someone who was just an absolute magnate of TikTok and Instagram on my stream, but I appreciate you making the time. It means a lot. And I figure people already know where to find you, but if you want to tell people that are here or listening on the replay, where should people look for you?
Yep, I'm Eric Whiteback across all socials. I think it's on the screen here, so just basically type that in one word, and you'll find me wherever if that's what you want to do. But yeah, Tandy, appreciate you having me on. This is a fun pod you have here, and excited to watch your channels grow here too in the coming years.
I appreciate that. All right, well, thanks to Eric, and thanks to all of you for being here. And now we'll let the sounds of New Hampshire's own Static Selecta play us out, where Eric is located, by the way.
There we go.
All right, man. Take care, and thanks a lot.
Yep, sure thing. See ya.
Static Selecta.